We had a big park. Unbelievable. I just look at these and I crack up. Yeah. Here. That's why I think one for all. Are you going to give us a cue to start recording or are you recording? We haven't started.
Good afternoon, folks. Thank you all for joining us today. If you haven't found your seats, please do so. Some house rules. If you have a cell phone, you can mute.
Louder.
Can you hear me okay? Put your hand in, raise your hand in the back. You cannot hear me. Yeah, more. Yeah. Can you hear me now? Better, even louder. Scream. Very loud. Do we have a volume thing up here? I'm gonna go voice side first one.
I don't know if that is received.
So, I'm going to do my best to talk as loud as possible. If during the event you do not hear me,
Like now?
Get cut off. Please raise your hand so I can see a visual that I need to just. Wrap it up. Thank you for joining us today. Again, if you have cell phones, please put them on mute, from silence, and turn them off. For those who just walked in, welcome. Please find your seats. Welcome to the 40th Board Candidates Town Hall here at the Church of the Communities.
Thanks everyone for coming. The Edgewater Environmental Coalition is community members and environmental stewards who bring a green voice to local challenges. As evidenced here, we have many people who are interested in green issues. Together, the Environmental Coalition builds and maintains a more sustainable future through action, organizing, education, and advocacy as today.
My name is David Host. I am here on behalf of the Edgewater Coalition to be your moderator for today's forum. I am happy to be here along with the 44 candidates, community members, and volunteers to go back to the Edgewater Environmental Coalition. They are founded on the principles of local solutions to global problems. They have value on their own and in concert with others. Understanding past efforts is the starting point for an effective future of action. We work together for common goals. We are yes people for passion and not obligation, and most importantly, we're inclusive. That's a good comment. We also acknowledge that we are here on native land. As part of the Pictou, Eora, Pascanaska, Potawatomi, and Miami nations, on land that we live and work, and we pay respects to those elders, past, present, and emerging. Again, thank you to our EEC chairs, Renee, who's right over here, and to Tricia, who was right there. So to get started, welcome to our candidates. We're going to give them each a minute for an intro. A quick round of applause for everyone coming today. We have randomly generated seating arrangements, and we're going to start off with Roxanne Bolton.
I'm going to stand because I have this horrible tiny voice, and at the last forum, my fiance and son were like, we didn't hear anything at all that you said, but you just heard a whole heck of a lot. So I just want to introduce myself. Let me ask a quick question. Do you want us to jump right into the first question, or would you like us to take a moment to
Take a moment. Now, where you are the people that tell us a little bit about you, the platform, especially sort of environmental sustainability.
So my name is Roxanne Bolton. I have lived here for over 25 years. I bought a house just down the street. I've raised my family here, and I'm very happy to be here today because I greatly care about the well-being of our community. I have been in federal government for the last 30 years. I worked as a director of constituent services for a U.S. Senator. So I know very much that the services that are provided to our constituents, the residents in this area, are critical to the well-being of this whole community, whether it's a small thing like making sure garbage is collected on time and properly, to larger things like how our recycling is done and how our streets function both for pedestrians, well, actually not just both, but for pedestrians, for bicyclists, for vehicles, and all other types of transportation that goes across our very, very busy streets. I'm very concerned, obviously, about public safety. My son was held up at gunpoint over the summer, but my son also was hit by a door. He was floored by a car when he was bicycling, and that ended up in an emergency room visit. So I have several concerns. I think there's not one that's greater than the other because if it's important to you, it is important to this office and to my office. And I look forward to talking more about me as we go by.
Hi there. Thank you all for being here. I am going to read notes because I want to keep on point too. So everyone here is one of the reasons why the 48th Ward is leading on climate action in Chicago. So thank you, EEC. The job of an alderwoman is to be a good steward of the land, and I appreciate the land acknowledgement that we did today. So thank you. I'm not an expert in climate action. I look to groups like this. I'm inspired at the federal level by the Sunshine Movement. And I'm really excited to do things at the local level with you. I want my kids who all grew up here to be able to see this as an option, as a place where they can go. I want their kids and their kids to be able to find this place as an option, but we need to work right now. And let's find action is now. I'm letting Hopkins, the queer woman of color, mom, a small business owner, vibrant economic communities is important to me, but we need to focus on things like representation because it matters. Government works better when people who are in government reflects the diversity of the people that we serve. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joe Young. I'm a resident of the community. I've been here my whole life. I'm the third generation of my family to live in Edgewater. My children are the fourth generation, and I'm raising them in the house I grew up in. It's a house that's been here since I think 1902 when we did a title search a while back. So we live in a vintage house, and I understand about preservation. I've been very active in the community for many years, principally in the last dozen or so at Pierce Elementary, where my kids go to school. My two youngest are still there. And professionally, I'm an affordable housing developer. I have developed green technology buildings going back to about 2010 when we delivered the Wilson Yard apartments and senior apartments right at Montrose and Broadway. That building is LEED certified, core and shell. I've also developed a lot of housing that meets the Enterprise Green Community Standard. Most recently, the Lucy Gonzalez Parsons Apartments at the Logan Square Blue Line, which is the first equitable transit-oriented development that's 100% affordable, developed in the city of Chicago. And I'm running out of time. Thanks.
I'm Brian Hogg. I'm the founder of Green Element Resale on Broadway. 36 years in Chicago, 12 years here at Edgewater. We've now got a staff of over 20. We in my first 8 years, I worked 80 to 100 hours a week to make Green Element happen. My promise to you, instead of settling for win-lose, the Northern Terminus study, which is just win-lose, is that I would work very hard to get us the win-win for all of us. Right now, we're at a crossroads in Edgewater. CDOT and IDOT have proposed to take away parking on Broadway from Hollywood to Devon. We have 6,000 Sheridan Road condo owners, and then scores thousands of bicyclists being very vocal with the city and state reps and that they want safer bike lanes. Just a few years ago, we had very high lake levels threatening many of the Sheridan Road high rises. To be continued.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Ward. I'm a renter and a community organizer and the current community representative on the Gowdy Elementary Local School Council. And when rains pummeled Edgewater last September, I opened a camping office for anyone who needed a safe and dry place to go, and personally unclogged 6 drains in my immediate neighborhood to clear the streets from flooding. So as aldermen, we're going to work with our ward superintendent and streets and sanitation to proactively and regularly clear out our storm drains. And I'll work to pass an ordinance that municipalizes snow removal of our bus stations and crosswalks so that everyone has access to the public way. And I know firsthand that our schools lack proper ventilation and heating and cooling system, and that many schools have crumbling infrastructure that we need to address. And so that's why I support CTU's Green Schools for Chicago initiative. I'm proud to say that not only am I endorsed by CTU and CCCTU and the Illinois Nurses Association, I'm also endorsed by the Sierra Club, who see me as the environmental champion here in the 48th Ward.
Thank you, Nick. I bring all of us to the end of the program. It's going to save much valued time.
I'm going to break the mold here. It's going to be almost impossible to get up in the space every time we speak. So I'm going to stay seated. Thank you everyone for coming today. My name is Nasir Faulkner. I am running for alderman of the 48th Ward to build on our community strengths and to bring a back to basics approach to constituent services, which I think is the most important part of the job of alderperson. Green initiatives at the local level play a crucial role in creating sustainable and healthy environments for future generations, which is what this is all about, right? That's why climate change and addressing climate change is so important so that future generations are able to succeed and live healthy, sustainable lives. So green initiatives, I also think, are really important for the economy, because as we transition, we'll be able to create jobs of the future, not just for our young people, but for folks who are transitioning from dirty jobs, right? So I think it's important, though, to close on remembering that a small action goes a long way. So recycling, using less water, using public transportation, every small action counts, and that's what it's going to take for us to really address climate change for the future.
Hey, I'm Andy Peters. I'm a resident small business owner in Andersonville for almost the last decade. I serve on the Andersonville SSA, member of the Andersonville Chamber of Commerce, and I'm a member of the Mayor's Small Business Advisory Council. I first started working in government as an intern when I was in college in the mayor's office, and then continued there after graduation before going to work for the Restaurant Association and opening up True North Cafe on Clark Street in 2016. I think a lot of the things we need to do for the environment, this ward, come down to residential issues and then business issues. We need to add more green space, make composting a lot easier for both residents and business alike. We need to add a lot more bike lanes, both protected bike lanes and paths specifically only for bikes. I think that every department, at least every relevant department, like Department of Transportation, building, should have a deputy commissioner that is strictly in charge of the environment. And that's my thing.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Andre Peliquin. I'm running for 48th Ward Alderman. What brought me originally here to Chicago was to serve in the AmeriCorps program in Chicago Public Schools. After that, I've been able to work with both Senator Tammy Duckworth, Lieutenant Governor Sheila Simon, and a couple of congresspeople. Most recently, I've become a residential real estate broker, which has been a great opportunity for me to be in the community every single day, see how our businesses are either thriving or struggling, see how we have the quality of our schools. And environmentally speaking, we have rising lake levels. We have, there's things that we can do here in the local ward so that we can get people together to be able to address these issues at hand. This is personal for me. I'm also a member of Alliance for the Great Lakes. We do frequent beach cleanups, as well as I want more involvement out of the aldermanic office in all of the green programs, whether that's being able to revamp our building code in order to make more green buildings, more green rooftops. And I'd love to talk about this further today. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Schwabach. I'm an educator and researcher at the University of Chicago, where I earned my PhD in political science. And I'm running to bring independent progressive leadership to the 48th Ward. I've been involved in politics since I was a kid when my mom first ran for school board, and I learned the important lesson that our democracy needs strong leaders in order to thrive. And I brought that energy to city politics, working first to strengthen our social safety net, and next on civilian oversight of the police. From day one, August 30th, I put my platform up. I've been running on a strong platform that highlights a number of environmental issues, from mitigating urban flooding to reconstituting the Department of the Environment, to ensuring we have a leader who's investing in bike and pedestrian safety so we reduce our carbon emissions. There are a lot of great folks up here running, and I'm proud to be up here today with all of them, but we need someone who's comfortable pursuing data-driven solutions that has a track record of building coalitions to pass citywide legislation. That's why I'm in this race. Thank you.
My name is Isaac Freilich Jones. I'm an Edgewater resident of born native Chicagoan and an assistant Illinois Attorney General. And my commitment to public service really comes from my own lived experience. When I was 17, I was diagnosed with cancer. I made it through because of a single mom who did the impossible every single day, because I was lucky enough to have health insurance, and because of a community that rallied to support my family. That journey gave me a lifelong commitment to giving back. I enrolled in Harvard Law School to study what it takes to create just, equitable communities. Coming back here to Edgewater, I became a regular volunteer at Care for Real and other nonprofits. And I began to serve as an assistant Illinois Attorney General, litigating to keep firearms off our streets and keep our communities safe. I'm running for alderperson because we need experienced community-centered leadership to navigate tomorrow's challenges. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Better Streets Chicago Action Fund, who understand, as I do, the importance of this moment and the need for sustainability candidates. I'm excited to be here today to share my vision for the 48th Ward.
Thank you. We have, out of hundreds of questions, going down to top 10. We will not be asking questions from the audience, but we have prepared questions for our candidates. If you are looking to ask particular questions, you may do so by submitting them to our email website or to them directly after this event. So we're going to get started with our first question. And we'll start with Glenn. For the policies and campaigns that the Edgewater Environmental Coalition are a part of, and there is a QR code for those policies here. What are you most excited about working with the EDC on that will have the biggest impact for your first year?
Yeah, so if you take a look at their website, it's kind of unfair to try to pin us down on one thing. There are so many things that this group is working on that I support. But one of the things that I noticed is that democratizing anything, including and especially our utilities, is exciting for me. I've been working on getting people engaged in our democracy between every election, not just voting, but actually getting involved. Development is coming to the ward as Joe was explaining earlier, and it's going to matter who sits in the aldermanic seat to make decisions about what's happening in the ward. 70% of Chicago's emissions come from our buildings. So building decarbonization, it will have a major impact in the 48, and we can lead on that. We are a very dense ward, and the climate resiliency, that funding that we can get from the Clean Energy and Jobs Act is there. As Alderwoman, I will help people get access to that. Thank you.
Joe?
Joe Dunn, and the policies that speak to me most are really working to make our built environment more green, and that includes implementing green technologies for buildings. I talked a little bit about the LEED certification and the Energy Star certification or Enterprise Green Communities. All three of those I've worked in. But what I've been doing a lot of recently is moving buildings to all electric and installing heat pumps for hot water systems as well as HVAC systems. And I think that it's critically important as we move forward with new construction is to be making sure that we're working to decarbonize our buildings and make sure that we're reducing the amount of fossil fuels we're using, because that's critically important for trying to control climate change. I also think we need to be using more permeable paving, both on new construction but also on public improvements. As the city of Chicago is looking at repaving streets or parking lots, like there's the huge parking lot next to the fire station. Those surfaces need to be permeable, and I want to see more permeable alleys as well. Thank you.
So I'm going to keep hammering down for the last 4 miles because it fixes so many things. So I believe we can protect the lakefront high rises. We can provide a dedicated and safer bike path for cyclists. We can eliminate the traffic chaos caused by Amazon and moving trucks on Sheridan Road. And we can protect our small businesses and ethnic restaurants on Broadway from losing their parking for their customers. Now, this is really important. Yesterday, I just completed talking to all the small businesses on Broadway, and every single business said no to losing their parking and loading zones to bike lanes, which is something that got me into this campaign, talking to Nick's advisors. Because they didn't seem to show any movement on that, on working with small businesses. So I suggest that we do a modified version of last 4 miles. What I propose is a dedicated service road from Osterman Beach at Ardmore going up to Granville with a wrought iron fence separating the lakefront bike path.
TBD.
To be.
So on the ward specific level, I'm really excited about working with EEC on native planting for a more resilient shoreline, infrastructure for rainwater catchment, opening more community gardens, and expanding landfill diversion and composting programs. See, this work not only has tremendous local impact, but it also brings people together in community, which is key to retaining the social cohesion of our ward. Citywide, I support reconstituting the Department of the Environment, passing the Water for All ordinance, saving the ash trees, building the last 4 miles along the lakefront, and democratizing ComEd. Thanks.
I think this is a great question. Things that I definitely will support are going to be water for all. So I think it's an understatement that if we don't have clean drinking water, that we will not survive as a species. Participatory budgeting, we're kind of going to further, right? So I'm going to have issue-specific advisory councils where I bring residents like all of you to the table to work with me on the issues affecting our community, and participatory budgeting is going to be a part of that. The Department of Environment, right? I think we're at a time in our society, not just in the city, where like we need to put up or we need to shut up. Climate change is affecting us in ways that I think our society is not taking seriously enough. And I think Chicago can really lead on that in a local way by reconstituting the Department of Environment. So those are just 3 of the top issues that you all are working on that I support.
As alderman of the 48th ward, I think the most important thing to worry about is the infrastructure improvements, that some of which are already funded and planned for, and some of which we want to do, but so far there's just plans, nobody quite knows how it's going to be paid for and things like that. Lakeshore Drive being the most important option, it is getting redeveloped. We need to make sure that it's done in an environmentally friendly way that makes it also easier for and safer for pedestrians and cyclists on the lakefront path, and that's green space. I support turning one of the lanes in each direction to a bus only lane, so that people from Edgewater down Sheridan Road, all the express buses that go downtown can do so faster and incentivize people to use public transportation. All the TIP money that we're using for the red line construction is great. Once again, incentivizing public transit. I don't know why we're not doing more for bike lanes with that TIP. Seems to me that we're talking about Broadway a lot, and Broadway certainly is being made safer and greener. We got the red line right next to it. TIP money's there. Let's use it.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot has been said here today that I do support. Absolutely. Nasir had mentioned about participatory budgeting. I do want the community involved in how we spend those dollars. We have a limited menu money as an aldermanic elected official. Whether that's, how do we fix our sidewalks, make them permeable? How do we get more bike lanes in, especially when you are repaving a road and then immediately have to go over and do it again? This is just insanity. There needs to be a ward master plan, which I'm absolutely for, and that'll be absolutely the community, you all involved. Regarding the Department of the Environment, of course, we need to bring that back. I'm not sure about other candidates, but that's something that I'm absolutely for, as well as just being able to make our community here continue to have a safe, affordable, diverse, and welcoming for all.
Great. Well, first I'll start with in the ward, and then I'll talk about citywide policy. So I've had the pleasure of participating in the beach stewardship program. I think it's a phenomenal program, and we should continue to support that through aldermanic resources. I love the Parkways for Pollinators program. I think we need to keep plugging native species around the ward and make sure we keep these critical and small species alive. On the city level, I want to work hand in hand with EEC to help decarbonize buildings in the city of Chicago, I think through regulations and finding private and public revenue streams. We can do a better job of incentivizing landowners to make sure that they're doing their most to reduce their carbon emissions. And I also think we need a ComEd franchise agreement that has robust consumer protections and allows us to update our alternative energy targets to make sure we're doing what we can on that level too. Thank you.
When I look at the EEC's policy priorities, I see that we share the same fundamental values and the same commitment to achieving the change that everyone in this room knows we need and need right now. So I'll be thrilled to collaborate with the EEC community when it comes to creating the Department of the Environment, when it comes to building decarbonization, when it comes to making sure that we do the Northern Terminus project on Lakeshore Drive right, when it comes to making sure that we have a actual waste strategy that works. And when it comes to making sure that we don't ram through a Commonwealth Edison deal that leaves our neighborhoods in our city behind. And because I know that everything we do is better when we do it together, let's make sure we bring EEC and the rest of the community into the process whenever we make sustainability policy.
I just want to say that there's seating over here for you guys. Yeah.
So EEC has an intensive matrix identifying needs from conservation and green energy to equity in water and clean air. I have the experience in my government experience to bring people together. I'm going to collaborate with grassroots organizations like the EEC and like the grassroots organization, which is no longer really a grassroots organization, but a well-respected, well-funded group that the city and the state turn to, which is the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition. I will stay open-minded to all ideas so that I can champion your concerns and your solutions on behalf of this community. And I'll bring them before state and federal leaders so that these issues and those ideas can be heard. We need to listen to your group's concerns immediately when those concerns are being identified. We probably would have saved a lot of expenses and fear in this community right now had we listened earlier when we started talking about climate change and the effect it has on the lakefront buildings. With my 3 decades of federal experience, I will bring back to our community overlooked funds, which will allow us to realize our hopes while protecting it for our children and our children's children.
Please hold those applause to the end of the program as we move on to our next question. Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan defines Edgewater as one of the major opportunities for our communities to experience one of the great things about Chicago. What will be your office's priorities for those that lakeshore, our greatest natural resource? We're going to start with Alder.
I like the round robin here. Alder, we have 3 unique neighborhoods here. We're a lakefront community, and this is one of the reasons why I chose to actually move here. We've been affordable over the years. We have Lake Michigan at our doorstep. We need to be able to protect it. That's through a couple of things that I've mentioned earlier, but also we have, I would like to see with federal funds, and I know that it's very difficult to move the federal government and the Army Corps of Engineers quickly, but I would like to see the riprap along the lakefront. It had been mentioned earlier, the last 4 miles is very an interesting piece to look at too. So these are a couple of things that we could start to think of about how we protect our lakefront, how we continue to utilize it, both with biking, keep it safe without just having scooters running up and down it. And I would actually also like to continue with the bike path currently, reorienting it to be more efficient. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Next up will actually be Andy Peters. We're going to switch up to well.
I think when it comes to the lakefront, so we need to work with federal and state and other municipalities to figure out how to address and study the erosion levels or the erosion that's happening at the lake, the shoreline, I should say, not the lake, because of rising lake levels. One thing that it's going to take is a lot of money, a lot of funding to do that and try to get from the federal or state government, although so far we've been trying and not getting nearly enough. the Sheridan Road corridor is all part of the red line tip that we passed a couple years ago for the red and purple line redevelopment. I think something we need to strongly try to do is get Sheridan Road out of that tip so that the money that they are accumulating that's being used on the red line can be used on the lakefront instead. It's the other major infrastructure project that needs to be addressed. And I don't think it should have been the tip to begin with, and since it is already, we need to take it out and use that money for proper lakefront erosion mitigations. Thank you.
So how I'll start is by putting together, excuse me, a lakeshore caucus, right? Because I think the number one thing we need is a unified effort to really push city and federal officials to help us come up with these solutions. And with that said, the problems that we're facing on the north side here in our ward are similar problems that wards on the south side are facing. So I'm going to work to bring all the persons from across the city together in a lakefront caucus so that we can approach the federal government, approach city government in a unified way. Multiple people talked about the need for the federal government. We're going to need their help. So what I'll do is use connections that I've made with colleagues in both Senate offices as well as congressional offices, so that this lakefront caucus can really pressure the government to move faster because we need solutions quicker. Where we're at, right? Like I think we need to find ways to fix these problems ourselves. Breakwater improvements, and then our jetties, they also need improvements, at least where I live.
Thank you.
They're pretty beat up, so.
So we can't talk about the lakeshore without talking about the South Lakeshore Drive. Right, there are state and local officials working to redefine the drive, and I remain committed to adding additional lakefront green space as part of that plan, along with what Andy mentioned, which is a dedicated bus lane in either direction. But our long-term vision as a city has to include replacing our highways and reintegrating the urban fabric of Chicago. But in order to achieve that vision, we need to take immediate and sustainable steps to increase public transportation and electrify our bus fleet. So I'm supportive of erosion protection, habitat restoration, and I want to make sure that these interventions are nature friendly, not just giant concrete walls. We also need to increase park district funding, as we need to invest in greater opportunities for community gathering spaces and events along the lakefront, ensuring that neighbors can gather together in public spaces, utilizing our lakefront as a maximum priority of mine.
Okay, this is the same issue. I started up and I'm just gonna keep going. So then we built that service road on the east side of the high rises. Alongside that can be bike lanes, which takes the pressure off, taking away parking and loading zones from small businesses on Broadway, of which those small businesses, 4 of them are Black owned. They all said they can't lose their parking and loading zones. 3 of us are the greenest businesses on Broadway: Green Element, BAM, and Sophie's Closet. All 3 of us said we would be forced into retirement if we lose our parking and loading zones on Broadway. So that's why we have to do it this way, because we protect the high rises at the same time. We clear up the congestion coming out of Lakeshore Drive to get the moving trucks and delivery trucks and residents on the east side of their buildings. We extend the bike path, we put it on pylons once it gets past Granville to connect it to Loyola and Northwestern.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
Joe Dunn, my top priority for the lakefront as alderman would be really it starts with working with the Army Corps of Engineers and making sure that they're working with the community on a community informed vision for what their plan is for the long-term stabilization of the lakefront. Part of that is also short-term stabilization. It's going to be a priority of mine to make sure we get funding to get some additional stone in there so that we can have immediate protection to reduce erosion of the lakefront while we're waiting on this long-term plan from the Army Corps of Engineers. Part of the solution is also increasing the restoration of the natural habitat on the beaches, the dune grasses, and the natural habitat there. And then also a priority of mine is improving access to the lakefront. The intersection at Alder is terrible, it gets blocked up by cars, and that's why bikes and pedestrians can't cross. We should have cameras in there. The city's piloting them downtown to automatically write tickets. I think if we write tickets there, we can stop people from blocking the box. And I think we need more east-west connections at Balmoral and Berwyn that'll bring people to the Lakefront Trail. Thank you.
I agree with most everything that everybody has said already, and there are things that we could do to keep water in our homes for flooding abatement, like using rain barrels and disconnect our downspouts and all that. But, you know, the extreme weather conditions, that is really what we're talking about here, and we're not the only ones feeling it. They are feeling it in the Philippines right now, where islands are going under. So this is a huge problem. As an alderwoman, I couldn't do this alone. We have a new Department of Forestry, but really what we need is to open up the Department of Environment. We need to fully fund it and we need to fully staff it.
Hi, Roxanne Bolton again. The most pressing issue I see right now with Lake Michigan for our community is in fact the beach erosion that threatens the immediate safety of our residents and the buildings in which they live. Last week, or maybe last forum, we had a candidate who said that they would throw a bunch of boulders into the lake, and in a weird Wile E. Coyote way, I kind of visualized that and thought that sounded like a great idea, but the reality is that shows how little understanding of how government works was made in that statement. In the back of the room, I have information about FEMA's hazard mitigation grants and flood insurance programs. Those are funding that can help offset costs to the residents living up and down in these buildings, but it also protect the buildings themselves. The other thing we've talked about here today too is the Army Corps of Engineers is doing a study which will take 2 to 3 years about lake levels. We need to get them in here now today, and had we listened to you, we would have been able to get those people there. Last thing I'll talk really quickly about is the need for clean water and pipes. I'll bring it up here.
So the lakefront really is an irreplaceable resource. It not only beautifies our city, it provides us with a place for recreation and our drinking water. So we need to approach all lakefront policy from a place of stewardship, of making sure we pass it to the next generation even better than we got it. And right now we have an emergency on our lakefront when it comes to erosion and flooding. The long-term solution, that's going to come from the Army Corps of Engineers. It's going to cost millions, tens of millions of dollars to make sure that we solve that problem. So what do we do in the short term? It starts by maintenance. We have to make sure we maintain our existing erosion infrastructure so that we can bridge the next couple of years until we get the final resolution from the Army Corps. We need to examine specific interventions across our lakefront, like riprap, like flare logs, like other interventions to stop flooding. We need to work with the Water Reclamation District as well to make sure that water flowing in from the area east of Ridge is not adding to our challenges on the lakefront. If we do those things, we'll be able to bridge the gap and get to the Army Corps of Engineers' full-term solution.
Larry again, everyone. So I actually think this starts with the water itself. Lake Michigan is our greatest resource, and we need to ensure that we have clean water, which means holding polluters accountable for what they're dumping in the lake, what they're dumping in downstream rivers. So that would take a leader who's not only working in the city of Chicago, but is working with leaders across the metropolitan area, and I'm committed to that. When it comes to the erosion problem, we need to first start with natural ways that we can block that, working with the park district to think about creative ways of putting in wetlands, using seagrasses, things that are going to create more resilience naturally. It also means adding breakwaters in areas where we don't have beach, because that's just part of what's going to have to happen. And we'll need state and federal partners to come in and help us to do that. And finally, because this was a multifaceted topic, I do think we need to increase the amount of access to Lake Michigan. That means increasing, as Joe said, the number of ways we can get over there and cross over Lakeshore Drive. But it also means making sure that the redesign of DuSable Lakeshore Drive is done with that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is a crossroads with the lake. Edgewater is connected via the DuSable Forgive me, French. Jean-Baptiste Souble, is that about? We have a teacher in the room and I appreciate him so much.
Please speak into the microphone, okay?
Please, if you can't hear me, raise your hand in the back and I will try my best to speak louder with the microphone that I have. What will be your office's priorities for the lakeshore in regards to commuters, transportation through Edgewater connecting to?
Roxanne again. I know the dangers faced by pedestrians and bikers. Last spring, my son was doored by a driver who wasn't looking and opened his door right into traffic. 2 weeks ago, I saw a pug and his owner bounce off the car at Persevering Broadway. We have very dangerous areas in our community. I'm going to work with organizations like yours, like EEC, the Active Transportation Alliance, residents, businesses, and other community organizations to get a balance of safety for our pedestrians, bikers, while considering the needs of our greater community. I'll also work with these groups and residents to make sure that traffic laws that are there to protect us are enforced. I live right off of Hollywood and Winthrop, and I know you all know the signs there that say, do not block this intersection, and yet every single day I see people blocking the cars and trucks blocking the intersection, and I've never seen that sign enforced. Drivers are looking at those as suggestions, and that forces pedestrians and bikers to weave around those cars. A few tickets from law enforcement will actually start to look out for pedestrian bike safety. I believe that this will be a deterrent that will ultimately save lives. Finally, thank you.
Everyone, no matter how you commute, you should feel safe to use our streets and our sidewalks and our trails. And government can help by building infrastructure to help save lives. So we need protected bike lanes. We also need massive public awareness campaigns so that people understand how to use the streets. My kids are learning how to drive. You know, I drive at night too. I don't want to hurt anybody. I just had 2 hip replacements, so I'm walking a lot. One day I will do more biking. But in the meantime, you know, I support citywide strategies to keep us all safe, which includes a bike grid, a CTA that works, and infrastructure, again, that saves lives. We have the data from Vision Zero to support these demands, and now we need to prioritize and fund these projects.
Joe Dunn. I think to improve transit safety, one of the things we need to be doing is working to implement and realize Vision Zero plan, and that's really the goal is 0 cyclist and pedestrian deaths. And the way you get there is the thoughtful implementation of redesign of our streets. And so when we're redesigning streets and we're bringing in bike lanes, I think we need to have standardized markings for bus stops, for loading zones, for parking. If you've been around the neighborhood, it seems to be very inconsistent. And when we have these standardized markings so that people know what they're seeing, we need to implement the redesign on a block by block basis so that when we're talking about spaces where there's small businesses that need parking, we're addressing their needs as well. We're addressing the needs of the bicyclists, we're addressing the needs of pedestrians, businesses, and the greater community. Thank you.
Remember, I don't know if any of you have been to the other ones, remember I'm the one who is not following any ideology or orthodoxy or political party. Witness that by me walking in here today to EEC and saying, you're not going to get a pony, which is the bike lanes on Broadway, taking away the parking from the businesses. But if we work together hard, we can build a really fantastic greenhouse, Nasir. Me as the oldest guy up here and Nasir as the youngest. We just need to work together harder and get this bike lanes, get the bike path connected on the lakefront, and by doing the service road on the east side of the high rises, that's also going to clear up a lot of congestion on Sheridan Road, which is the original part of this, the congestion coming up off Lakeshore Drive. And we, like I said before, we can't afford to lose our small businesses on Broadway. It would just strip us of whatever character we have, and then it would get replaced by multinational corporations. How would we pay for this? To be continued.
So I believe that better infrastructure is required for increasing safety on streets, sidewalks, and trails. I support measures like curb cuts and bump outs to help improve driver visibility, expanded lane shifts like we have on Alder over by Sen, expanding the rotaries that we have on Glenwood to the Kenmore Winter corridor, and more lane reductions on busy thoroughfares. I believe we especially need these on Ridge and Broadway, which are dangerous highways that cut through the 48 ward. So I'm grateful that a memorandum of understanding was recently signed between CDOT and IDOT to better streamline the approval and implementation of safer road design. We've talked a lot about the last 4 miles, and it's probably not the last time we're going to bring this up. But that program would build better climate resilient infrastructure, but would also introduce new and safer access points for pedestrians, cyclists, and people with disabilities to utilize our public lakefront.
I like being the youngest candidate here because my generation, Larry, a lot of the younger kids here, we're going to be the ones who are going to be affected by climate change, the climate change catastrophe the most. So it's important that our voices are being heard. Definitely will support a bike rig for our ward. I know that there's an effort citywide, whether that succeeds or not. That's something that I'm going to work on for our ward in particular. I'm happy that Nick mentioned Ridge. Definitely, if it's not there already, by the time one of us gets elected, making sure that there's a stoplight at Ridge and Lane, because that's a death trap and people should be able to cross the street. Generally speaking, though, we need infrastructure improvements, right? We need infrastructure improvements so that we are creating a safer environment so that we can promote active forms of transportation. So that people do feel safe walking, people do feel safe riding their bikes. This is an important subject for me. I don't own a car, so I typically take public transportation or I walk. So, being safe in getting around the city is something that I'll definitely fight for.
So a top priority of the redevelopment of Lakeshore Drive and the terminus of Lakeshore Drive needs to be improving the flow of traffic to and from the drive. And this is not to encourage car use. It's to discourage what we have now, which is blocking intersections, very dangerous situations, and idling vehicles pretty much all day long. So this is very. So it's not just about what's happening at the terminus of Lakeshore Drive, it's about the entire ward. As a few people have already mentioned, Ridge Avenue is a street I drive on every day, and every day I'm shocked at what other cars are doing. And it's also not about making it harder to drive necessarily. It's about, there's all sorts of mitigations we made in terms of lane reductions, things like that. We don't want to make it harder to live in the ward. We want to discourage people from driving badly within the ward, though.
Andre Peliquin. We have a problem in our ward, which is from about Foster Avenue down to even outside of our ward to Montrose Beach. We had billionaire Ken Griffin donated about $12 million to reorient the lakefront trails. Every single summer, we do have drivers, pedestrians, bicyclists that are training for the Tour de France to basically cut through our entire park, where it was working well before, and now it's rejiggered to be able to, there's people there with that have baby strollers, and every year there's a crash or whatnot on the lakefront. That needs to be reoriented as well. That had zero input, I believe, from our community. That is one local problem that I can see that I'd like to take care of with your assistance. Citywide, I have also signed on to the Chicago Bike Grid Now platform, which is a goal to have 450 plus miles of our city e-bike friendly, and with that have that infrastructure, as well as have a 10 mile per hour in some streets speed limit. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Larry again. So this last year was one of the deadliest years on record for pedestrians and bikers. We lost 27 pedestrians and 8 bikers, and accidents that could have been avoided. It's time to say enough is enough. We need to elect a leader who's serious about making this a priority. When we repave our streets, we have to implement pedestrian safety features like bump outs, like raised crosswalks. I'm committed as alderman to making sure we survey all the crosswalks near schools, places of worship, and senior centers to make sure that they're safe. I also fully endorse the Safe Streets for All program of making sure we find ways to pedestrianize our streets, implement protected bike lanes when we can, and to make it safer for everyone who needs to move through the city. But we also need a leader who's going to make accessibility a priority. This last year, the federal government took action against the city because we're failing to make sure our crosswalks are safe for those who are visually impaired. I'll work with groups in our disability community to make sure that when we do these improvements, they're improvements for everyone. Thank you.
So as a lifelong Chicagoan, I know that there is no one size fits all solution for safety on our streets. And that's why I'll work block by block to make sure that we implement solutions that react to and reflect the needs of those who work, travel, and do business on those specific blocks. I'll also make sure we build out east-west bike lane connections to add to the strong north-south connections we have already in the community. But beyond that, we have a deeper political challenge, which is that for too long, CDOT and IDOT planners have prioritized above all else the needs of folks traveling between the north suburbs and downtown and through our community. It's got to stop, and when I'm your older person, it will stop. We will make sure that CDOT remembers that we in this neighborhood have needs too, that those needs are legitimate, and that our safety matters.
You actually hand it to Larry, as we start off with Larry for the next question. Excellent. Sorry. We are worried about older architectural features in Edgewater being torn down. How will you balance affordable housing, city revenue, while being sustainable and preserving Edgewater's diverse historical architectural character?
Okay, Larry again. So, you know, early in when I got into this race, I was a big proponent of adaptive reuse of historic buildings. I think we need someone who's going to make that a priority because tearing down these buildings is really having a negative impact on our environment, and we should try and reuse them as best as we can. You know, existing thinking, I think we need to make sure that it's difficult to downzone our neighborhoods. I support the Connected Communities Ordinance. I think it's been very effective. I want to expand the inclusionary zoning part of the ward because I think that as much as possible, we should be trying to preserve 2 and 3 flats in this community. And finally, I would also try and implement environmental impact fees in the 1st ward and in the 33rd ward. They've used this as an effective policy strategy to try and dissuade folks from just knocking down buildings whenever they want haphazardly. And I think it's a great way that we can regather some of that cost and use it for public amenities. Thank you.
So preserving our existing building stock needs to be a value that we evolve to every day as we make decisions about our future. And the question I think asked, well, how will you balance affordability and preservation, historic issues? And to me, you don't need to balance those things because when you preserve an older building, you maintain affordability in the neighborhood. When you preserve an older building, you avoid the waste that comes from a tear down. When you preserve an older building, you make sure you're not wasting additional energy by building a structure that you never really needed in the first place. So let's do all of those things by making sure that every chance we get, we preserve our older structures. And most importantly, let's make it as easy as possible to renovate, to update, and to repair the structures we have so that we can keep them active, engaged in the neighborhood, and make sure we honor all of the values you mentioned in the question.
Hello, Roxanne Goldman. I have a home that I purchased 20 years ago because it was over 100 years old at that time. My father was a blue collar union card holder, tool and die maker, and gave me the value of the kind of workmanship that goes into these old buildings. I was overjoyed when Peter Holston brought in layer upon layer of financing to keep the Bryn Mawr and the Belshore intact so that they could be jewels, crown jewels within our community. In compliance with the Hatch Act, I don't promote the federal agency that I work for, but let me reassure you, I am a federal expert in housing. I am a federal expert in urban development. I am a federal expert in fair wages. I have worked on hundreds of projects across the country, both affordable and mixed income. I know exactly what it takes to build a building from scratch, to take a historic property and access layers of funding to keep it as a testament to Edgewater's rich history and yet remain fully functional for the needs and the lifestyle of our community today.
Lenny Manaha and Warren, we love the dense diversity of our ward, and then that includes our housing stock. And I agree with all that has been said about the small building owners. We need to protect what we have and preserve it, because that is naturally occurring affordable housing. And so how can we help as Alder people, as an Alder woman, to connect small landlords to the resources that they need? There is funding and resources available because of the Clean Energy and Jobs Act for buildings to be more energy efficient. We also can help people get connected to the assessor's office for affordable housing special assessment program. And as a reminder, development is coming to the board because of the Connected Communities Ordinance. So it's going to matter who sits in the aldermanic seat, who talks to those developers when that happens.
Joe Dunn, and absolutely, we need to preserve the character of the buildings in our neighborhood. And I don't think that the question about balancing preservation and sustainability and affordable housing is really, I mean, there's no need to balance them because they all work together hand in glove. Preserving the building is sustainable. Preserving a building is affordable. I've rehabbed and preserved over 300 units of affordable housing rental apartments across the city of Chicago in walk-up buildings. Some of these apartments have been converted to full electricity, heat pump hot water. Some of those buildings were historic buildings. I know how to finance it. I know how to access the tools to get it done, whether it's low-income housing tax credits, whether it's historic tax credits, whether it's the layered financing that Roxanne mentioned about the Bryn Mawr Bellshore buildings, because I refinanced those buildings twice to keep them affordable. And as the costs go up and the rents are fixed, you need to have a plan to keep the building sustainable. And I'm out of time, so pass it on. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. Kind of impossible. All I can do is try to add on a little bit. And that's, I mean, those are all fantastic answers. Harry explained to us that if you want to hold on to single family and 2 flats, you got to hold on to that zoning neighborhood by neighborhood. So having a really open, inclusive process for down zoning, John wants to down zone his neighborhood. Those are things that we would do. So I'm gonna just skip to how do we pay for some of this stuff, because I can't really improve on a lot of those answers. So Tom Dresser in his work, Chicago is Not Broke, shows that there's 500 million in unallocated funds yearly hidden in TIF districts that are taken away from our property tax revenues. We also, did I mention I was born on a farm? We need a public bank, just like conservative North Dakota has.
Yay.
So like Isaac mentioned, preservation of existing affordable housing is the best way to maintain affordability. You know, we know that 4 CTA-owned sites will come up for redevelopment following the completion of the CTA RPM project. My office will be committed to adhering to design guidelines that maintain the continuity and beauty of the neighborhood. But housing is more than just large-scale development, which is why I'm committed to preserving the existing affordable and low-income housing that we do have, our senior CHA buildings, the Pines of Edgewater, and our SROs. Unfortunately, we've seen SROs in Uptown rapidly disappear over the last decade, which is why I support strengthening the city's SRO preservation initiative to keep maintaining that crucial low-income housing. But like Larry said, I also support the preservation of 2 and 3 flats, including that we preserve both the buildings and the multiple units within those buildings. And finally, I want to expand the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, making it easier and less expensive for homeowners to include to add on-site units.
So I like this question because I like history, and I think preservation is a lot about history as well, not just about housing. So this is definitely gonna be something that I focus on as alderperson, so that we are protecting the history of our ward, because there is a lot of it and there's a lot of good history. Ways in which we'll do it, or ways in which I will do it, is definitely going to be through my housing advisory council. So this council made up of neighbors and stakeholders are going to be tasked, this is one of the tasks, not the whole entire thing. But be tasked with the preservation of historical buildings, right? So figuring out how we do proper maintenance so that they can continue to exist. Figure out how we can get the right folks in those buildings to work on restoration, because we just don't want anyone working on restoration and then taking away the character of these buildings. Increasing public awareness is really important too, right? Making sure that folks know it's important that we do this work, securing funding, and then most importantly, as Larry mentioned, making sure we're doing some adaptive reuse so that we're actually reusing these buildings for other purposes. Sorry.
I would like to echo what Joe said about and not necessarily being balancing, like as if these are two antagonistic principles, building, developing, while still being environmentally conscious and doing what's best for the community. We want to develop in a way that maintains the unique community character of Edgewater, but development has to occur, especially when you consider there are unhoused people that we see all throughout the ward living on the lakefront. That's morally bankrupt of us that we're allowing this to happen. There's a lot of reuse of buildings that need to occur to make sure everybody in the city of Chicago has a roof over their heads. We've seen, like, for instance, which I think is great, what is happening in Woodlawn, where they are reusing a close school for migrants who have just arrived. We need to do more of that for people who have been in Chicago longer. And we need to use CARES Act funds, buy a hotel, even to redevelop for that purpose. That's what DuPage County has done in other places, and we can do that.
I'm gonna slightly disagree here with a couple of folks. I think that we have, it's been mentioned about downzoning. I know this is kind of a nuanced topic, but we have to have the ability to build in our community. Yes, we are already dense, but this is a supply issue. You can't just downzone your way into a result and hope for affordable housing. There's absolutely, but at the same time, I'm absolutely for if we have to put a 90-day delay on specific buildings that we could, that are historic in our neighborhood, that are part of the community and the fabric and the history, I would absolutely be for that. If there's a way we can think outside of the box, such as if a particular building is redone, maybe we can save the facade of the building itself, the front area. These are outside of just a couple of the outside of the box ideas, but the rezoning of entire neighborhood is basically telling the future this will stay permanent for the entirety and nobody else can live here except for the people currently living here.
To go and dive a little deeper into preservation of our historic buildings. This is a two-part question, so if you need me to repeat it, please let me know. Is there a policy or action in the ward or council you will support to preserve existing buildings? Second part, for new buildings, especially the ETODs or equity transit oriented developments, what green materials and practices will you demand developers implement, and how will you hold them accountable?
So as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, it's been known for decades that the most affordable, the most sustainable building that you possibly have is the one that you already have. And a couple of ideas to make sure that you're able to retain those buildings. First, we can kill two birds with one stone by using stormwater ordinances to encourage preservation by requiring certain impermeable or permeability requirements for paving and imposing other rules that prevent tear downs, but also make sure that we're mitigating our flooding. Second, in certain instances, we're going to have to landmark buildings of exceptional value if they're threatened with destruction. Third, let's make it as easy as possible to renovate as opposed to tear things down. And fourth, when it comes to new construction, we have to make aggressive use of our energy transformation code, updated every couple of years to incorporate new green building techniques, but also to expand the scope of the regulation so that our code is always up to date with the most up-to-date technology.
Well, since I went really in depth on adaptive reuse on the first one, I'm going to stick mostly to the second part of the question. So I'm really proud of my campaign because we don't take money from developers. We want the community to be at the center of our development decision-making process. And I'm going to require all new developments to submit a sustainability matrix. So basically a survey that says, what is this developer doing to make sure that this is a sustainable development? And that will be made public, and it will be something that the development and zoning committees that I established will be able to review. I also think it's critical that we hold developers accountable to make sure that they're implementing flooding mitigation techniques in all new developments. We saw how bad flooding can be this last year. We need green roofs, we need flooding gardens, we need permeable pavement, and we need to ask developers to make sure they're integrating those conservation designs into new developments. Thank you.
Andre Pelican, yeah, in order to create more housing as well, we could do adaptive reuse of some of our vacant commercial storefronts. Those could be converted into livable spaces. We could have, just as it was mentioned earlier, the 606 that saw a lot of development along their Rails to Trails program, and adding the tear down fee of $25,000 was very helpful in order to put that towards future housing in the neighborhood, as well as slow down the process of complete demolition of their units, as well as just putting up brand new buildings. And also any kind of inclusionary zoning that I would have the community involved in those kind of decisions through the aldermanic office.
So let me tell you a little story here. Last year, me and my partners were opening up Sushi Hall in Lincoln Park on Clark Street. And we got our building permits and we built the plumbing, so that used PVC pipe instead of concrete, because the city had a pilot program that kind of allowed you to do that. When we were then inspected like a month after the pilot program ran out, which we didn't know, so your contractor architect did all the permits, it turned out that the pilot program had expired a week before we got our permits. Our contractor not submitted for the pilot program, and we had to or we were told we were going to have to spend, it would have been $25,000 replacing the PVC pipes with iron pipes. We whined and we moaned, and we really didn't want to do it. We talked to everybody we could, and we could not get out of it, and we had to spend the money. I think that a lot of these environmental regulations want to put on buildings. People are going to say they can't do, but they can do them if you really make them. And we just need to hold people accountable.
So yeah, I'll be really quick on the first part and then kind of dive into the second part. So definitely the encouraging reuse of historical buildings is going to be important for me, securing funding for preservation and restoration projects. So I'm definitely going to have a grant writer in my office who can help us find resources and monies outside of city government, because we just need to do that, right? We can't keep relying on the city, which is always telling us that they don't have enough money. And then increasing public awareness, because I think like that's going to be one of the ways that we get people to care about the preservation of historical buildings. For the second part, all developments that need to get approval from myself will need to have landscaping plans, so that we're not just putting up a concrete building, that we're adding vegetation, and that we're adding pedestrian spaces for the community to take part in. And I think to hit at that last part of accountability, I think the question is not how we hold developers accountable, but how we hold the Alder person accountable, right? So that means electing someone who is independent of real estate interests and development interests in this ward, because we answer to you, the developers do not answer to you.
Need a sign. So I support demolition fees like the 606 Wilson surcharge ordinance that I would like to see expanded to the 48th ward. Not only would that help preserve existing buildings, the fees help support the Chicago Community Land Trust, which provides greater opportunities for families to purchase homes at affordable rates. Now, our residents deserve to live in homes, go to schools, workplaces, and other buildings that use sustainable materials like cross-laminated timber and renewable energy like solar panels. So we must incorporate decarbonization into performance-based building standards in the ward. I support the resolution championed by the Sierra Club, EEC, and other organizations requiring all buildings, both public and private, to use 100% clean, renewable energy, and want to make sure that that's expanded to include old existing buildings as well.
I'm gonna push back on Andre. So zoning isn't the 10 commandments. It isn't set in stone forever. It's a community process. So if a community wants to hold on to their single family homes and their 2 flats, that's their choice, and it's a process that's done with the alderman. And if in the future people move in who don't want to keep that zoning, then you go through the whole process again. About efficiency, there's a lot of things about efficiency that require a new kind of mindset in construction, and especially in rehab construction. Joe would know a lot about this. And it's that like radiant heat is the most efficient, better insulation, but radiant heat is not something that a lot of contractors are familiar with. And like I said, if you're gonna retrofit it into older buildings, then you gotta have contractors who have the kind of minds that can solve jigsaw puzzles. So there's a lot of room for improvement on all that.
Thank you. Joe Dunn. So policy or practice that's currently in the Board or Council that I would support, definitely the 90-day demolition delay. If you've been reading the news lately, there's a frame house in Lakeview that got purchased by the adjoining property owner. He wants to tear it down. And this house is, I think, predates or was one of the first houses constructed right after the Chicago fire. So it's marked orange on the historic survey that was done by the city back in the 90s. I think we need to revisit that survey. I think we need to revisit the survey and look at the historic properties in the city and bring that up to date. We need to be preserving these buildings. When we talk about new buildings, they need to be all electric. We need to be looking at minimum efficiency standards, whether it's the perimeter insulation or the U value of the windows. We need green roofs. We need solar. We need to make it easier to get solar on buildings, and we definitely need stormwater detention. And how do you hold property owners accountable or developers accountable? Well, when we have a neighborhood that's been downsized, if they want to develop, they have to get a zoning change, and they have to come to the community for that approval, and that's how we hold them accountable. Thank you.
Yay.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said, especially about community engagement, which is one of the reasons why I'm really excited to be here in this room and with EDC and what you do is going to matter. If this board can lead on climate change, and we are already doing it. We just need to do more. We need a Department of Environment to help support the work that you're doing here, and we need to expand what we're doing. I agree with all the things that have been said, including demolition fees and having community at the table when we're making decisions that are going to affect you, and not just you, but generations to come. It's going to matter who sits at the aldermanic seat. So I hope that you will consider that when you make your choice on February 20th.
Hi, Roxanne here. Here's a fun fact. The Inflation Reduction Act, which was recently passed, is the biggest climate legislation piece in history. Right now, many grants are handed to the city and the state on a silver platter in formula grants, but hundreds of millions of dollars actually never reach to organizations like yours here today because they're competitive grants and no one knows how to take advantage of those. I do, and I will. The second thing is that when we have buildings that are refinanced or there's other changes, that funding is actually done with our tax dollars. That means that monies that are given to those buildings are actually meant to also be put into the buildings on behalf of the residents. Talking to residents, that's not happening. Look at some of the buildings up and down Edgewater. Look at some buildings, the SROs that we see up and down the road in Kenmore. Finally, I just want to say that there is a state bill that's in the works right now, but I will introduce a state ordinance to prevent irresponsible landlords from being rewarded for keeping these vacant storefronts. I've lived here so long, and I know that Johnny's Project has been out for what, 10, 15 years. I will make sure that no one uses those tax rebates.
Yay.
On to our next question. We're going to talk about waste in Chicago. Chicago has one of the largest problems with waste, dismal recycling rate, plastics on the beaches, environmental justice issues with industry, and no citywide composting are just a few of the issues that we have with litter abatement in Chicago. What do you intend to do about waste in our neighborhood and at a city council level? Andy?
So there's a lot of work to be done on making composting infrastructure much easier. We compost at the cafe. Where here's came from. And it's difficult for many reasons. For one thing, the price, I think it's probably about $80 or $90 a week you pay for composting, as opposed to $250 a month we pay for dumpster fees. Above that, educating people on what can be composted and what cannot be. It's hard enough to educate people on what can be recycled and what can't be. When you're dealing with composting, it's so much harder. Citywide composting effort needs to be done. We need to, the board, make it easier for neighborhood groups, chambers of commerce to work together with together programs that people can compost effectively. I also think an effective way of stopping waste would be a small tax on to-go styrofoam and cups on the retail level, not the wholesale level, so that people know to bring their own cups and stuff.
Thank you. I think with waste, the number one thing we need to do is educating the public, right? I think that's really the biggest thing, is making sure that folks are aware of why this is beneficial. So that's something that I'm definitely going to do, is raise public awareness. I think we also need to make things like recycling more convenient. So we should have more recycling cans around our neighborhood, not just regular garbage cans. That way we're actually creating the incentive for folks to actually recycle more. I definitely want to work with businesses to encourage them and make sure that they are recycling as well, because they're sorting out a lot of trash, and making sure that they're on top of it is going to be beneficial for our community. I definitely want to have a ward service corps, which is going to bring young people together around volunteerism and professional development skills. And so one of those things that we'll work on will be volunteering around beach cleanups and park cleanups. That way we're letting young people, bringing young people together to work in their community and really have a stake in, how their community works. Yeah.
So at the ward level, I want to work with building property managers, boards, and residents to establish building-specific recycling programs that institute better recycling practices. I also believe that Chicago needs to place more responsibility on corporations and manufacturers to recycle. So I support a city-specific extended producer responsibility that shifts financial responsibility to manufacturers to pay for recycling costs and other post-consumer impacts. And because the 48th ward is the densest in Chicago, this presents opportunities for us to look at creative solutions to our waste problems. I'd love to expand landfill diversion and composting projects so that we can pilot some ward-wide initiatives that on the local level, then once they're successful, scale that up to citywide.
Well, here's where I can give EEC a big pat on the back. If you really read the stuff, and if you really know about recycling, you'll know that there's not a lot of recycling happening because China stopped buying our quote unquote recyclables because they were too dirty. EEC talks about this in 2021. Waste management is double charging us by taking the recyclables and landfilling them because there's no market for recyclables. So like I said, pat on the back to EEC because there's even people up here who are behind the times in what's being recycled. The only two things that are really being recycled are scrap metal and cardboard and paper. There's essentially no recycling of glass happening, but Tom Murphy and I were just talking before this started that I saw an exciting development that glass can be made into sand, which there's a worldwide shortage right now of sand. So what a perfect opportunity to take some of those old brownfield sites and pile up the glass, which isn't being recycled because there's no market. Thanks.
Joe Dunn. I think this issue is a perfect reason why we need to, we need to have the Department of Environment. We need citywide leadership around recycling and composting and sustainability. And one of the big issues right now for me and for my family, and I think for much of the ward, is it's a very passive recycling system we have here in the city of Chicago. We need more education. We need active, pushing that information out to people. What is recyclable? What should be going in those blue bins in the alleys? I think most people don't really know. Getting a flyer once a year from CDOT that says, or from Streets and Sands that tells you what day they're going to come through and pick up your trash and has a couple pictures on it. That's not enough. We need an active program. We need active leadership at City Hall on that. And I think the Department of Environment would be the perfect vehicle for that. Thank you.
I'm a board member of the Andersonville Chamber of Commerce, and I'm really proud that Andersonville was voted number 2 in the world, one of the coolest places in the world to live. Excuse me. But it was because of our resiliency during the pandemic, and also because of Clark Street Compost, which is one of the first pilots in Chicago for neighborhood composting, and that's something that we could scale up because we've already done it. We should look to other cities like San Francisco who are leading the way in terms of recycling. Ours are in single digits. They have 80% of their waste diverted from their landfills. They did it by banning single-use plastic, polystyrene food containers, and mandating recycling and composting at all city events. So we have a chief sustainability officer, and they're doing great things around community gardening and composting, but really we can't have all of these people working in silos. We need to work together, and that requires a Department of Environment.
Your applause to the end of the program. Thank you.
Hi, Roxanne. I think that our city needs better recycling measures. And yes, educating our residents how to recycle is going to be a big help. But let's start out looking at that education process. I received 3 flyers last week or a couple weeks ago, which essentially I used by recycling them. There has got to be better ways. We can do electronic, QR codes on our trash cans and different things in order to really educate ourselves without creating even more waste. So also one of the issues is we're educating ourselves, but the other issue is how much is really getting recycled? I mean, it is abysmal to think about how little of what we think we are recycling is being recycled. I think that we need to look back at our contracts, not just to make sure that they have the best cost benefits for our community, but are these contracts tapping into businesses and to waste management companies that actually know how to do a good job recycling? So let's look around us. Let's look at Oak Park's composting, the composting she had mentioned, and let's do better.
So there's no doubt we don't do a good enough job when it comes to this issue, and I'm just going to share 5 strategies that I think will help us move that needle. First, composting. So many folks who live in 6 flats or mid-rises don't realize that's something they can do. Let's help them. Let's give them the tools they need to do composting even in their own homes. Second, education. So many folks across the city don't recycle the right way. Let's make sure that we're educating folks about the best way to do recycling, and let's make sure we're doing it in every language that's spoken in Chicago, not just in English. Third, compliance and oversight. A couple of years ago, it turned out that a major city contractor that was responsible for recycling wasn't doing it. They were just sending that stuff that went into that blue box onward to a landfill. We have got to do oversight and compliance right to make sure that we are getting the product we're paying for. Finally, it isn't just residential. Industrial, institutional, and construction amount to 2.4 million tons of recycled waste per year. Let's make sure we're diverting that away from landfills and not putting all the onus on residential.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone, Larry again. So the poor recycling rate is unacceptable. I think we all agree. The city almost annually releases a statement showing that recycling is bad and here's what we could do about it. So this issue isn't about having the right idea. The ideas are all there. It's about sending someone to City Hall who's going to be active and hold waste haulers accountable, as Isaac brought up. So my plan includes first having a city councilor who's going to actively monitor how we're doing waste management And when waste haulers are not recycling as they say they are, we need to end contract with them and find companies that are actually going to do that work. It also is about education. I knock on a lot of doors in the neighborhood running for alderman, and I talk to folks who say, I don't know what's supposed to go in the recycling bin, you know, so we need an aldermanic office that's continually sending those updates, sending folks ways to remember what they can and can't recycle so that on our end, things are being done the right way. And finally, it means integrating citywide composting. Minneapolis and San Francisco have done this. We need to do it here too in Chicago. Thank you.
We've heard a lot about education today, and while I am absolutely for education, we've tried this for the past 10 to 20 years and results have not improved. The facts are the facts, as it was mentioned earlier. San Francisco can recycle things at 80%, where we are 5%, 7% at best. What I haven't heard today is incentivization. I'm from San Francisco. I remember growing up, there's something called the California Cash Refund. Every single can that you return to the recycle facility, you can get that 5 cents for. The amount of bags upon bags of recycled cans that I have seen, people are able to earn money, and you know, even as a child, I was like, hey, this is some spending money I can get. That I think is one of the tools that they have been able to have a higher recycle rate. Additionally, it has been said today, and I completely agree, the onus currently is on us residential folks, where 80%, that number again, is at the industrial level. We need to be able to hold the industrial companies, especially in our city, accountable when it comes to their participation in recycling.
Thank you. Thank you all for your vital responses. Next up is community. The community of Edgewater. Looking for our next 48th ward alderperson. All candidates have said that they have a community input process for those decisions that we talked about today. Please be specific about the community input process that you plan to put in place.
Absolutely. I think it's not just the process, it's regular community engagement. It has to be proactive and it has to be regular. I want to have zoning advisory council when I'm alderman. I also want to have an environmental advisory council. I think it's building groups like that will be focused on specific issues that as an alderman you're engaging with on a regular basis, but it's also going out to the community and meeting with the block clubs. And one thing I've mentioned in other forums that I really want to see happen is to recreate something like the Edgewater Community Council used to be. I think we need a centralized voice for the community so that each block club is not speaking on its own, that the community can come together and have that voice in a structured manner that interfaces with the aldermanic office. And maybe those advisory councils are part of that centralized group, if it's the community council or not. But I think that it's an active process and it needs to be a centralized process where people know where to go. Thank you. Left or right?
Oh, let's go to Brian.
So I hope that if I don't win, whoever wins will pick up this idea. I'd like to have one night a week where people could just show up at the alderman's office and take a number, like a deli style thing, because some people can't make meetings during the day because of their jobs. And I would like to see our next alderman have maybe one night a week or a weekend to just open it up and talk about some of the most important things, hear back from the community. And as we've been talking about, one more little cleanup on the last aisle. As the oldest guy up here. So waste management is a huge, massive corporation. If there were markets for the recyclables, they would be turning them into the markets. That's why they're turning them into landfill and then charging us twice, because there aren't enough markets. And that's a big problem.
So like Ryan just said, I also support, open evening office hours as well as flexible scheduling from the aldermanic office, along with quarterly town halls, community zoning processes, and participatory budgeting. And I'm the only candidate who's actually demonstrated that approach as part of my campaign. I've hosted 4 town halls throughout the course of the campaign, including one on environmental justice. And my background as a community organizer means that I understand we have to meet people where they are. And that's work that I've done as a member of the 48 Board Neighbors for Justice, standing on street corners and talking to people about critical issues that impact all of us. That's work that I do every single day, canvassing in every corner of the board to talk to our neighbors about the issues that they're facing. So my experience and my deep community relationships mean that I am singularly positioned to follow through on these commitments.
So I'm excited to hear that Joe is for advisory councils. Hopefully he will support some of mine when I'm elected. I've been talking about advisory council since day one, and I'll tell you why. There is a huge divide between people, whether it be in Chicago or anywhere else in this country, and the folks that represent them, right? I think we can all agree that we do not feel connected to the politicians who represent us. The only way that we're going to change that is by actually bringing people to the table to work with us on the issues. And so I'm going to have issue-specific advisory councils where I bring neighbors, stakeholders, and other community organizations together so that I'm not the only person giving the solutions to the problems. I can admit I do not have all the answers, but what I can do is bring the right people together so that we can work on the issues affecting our community and actually get solutions on the table so that we can stop talking about the same things and actually resolving the problems that are facing our community.
Thank you.
Yeah, I obviously agree with everybody else about we need more advisory council in response to constituents, replying to all emails, phone messages, yourself, and you're actually reading them, not just relying on your staff members to make these decisions and reply to constituents for you. You need to be informed, you need to know what's going on. I think a big tool that can be used, and some already use it more effectively than others, is just the weekly email blast. I subscribe to probably a dozen Alderman's email blasts, and it's surprising how many of them don't mention what's happening at city council or defend their votes, whether it's yes or no. Just keep people informed. Also adding more information about just community events, post buildings like the Chamber of Commerce does, so that people know what's going on. And when there's new liquor licenses or development in the ward that they have to send out a notice within 150 feet or whatever it is, making sure that goes on email too, so that people can respond.
I'm going to second a lot of what Nasir had to say on those ideas, as well as when I'm Alderman, I hope he joins me. So basically, additionally, as it was said earlier, I would love to have an aldermanic open house night at least once a month, have it in the evening, meet people where they are. Additionally, I was part of what Harry Osterman, his committee, his citizen housing committee before the pandemic hit. It was great to be able to weigh in on those issues that are preservation of housing, affordable housing as well. So, and future developments. That's something that wasn't done in the past. Absolutely, I would have that program once again, grow it, as well as with that participatory budgeting as well. That's the ability that we can get people together here and focus on the needs of our community. Additionally speaking, I want our section of my neighborhood uptown is basically the forgotten child of the ward, and I want to be part of the greater 44 process.
Right on, Larry again. So this issue is really important to me. I teach politics at a university, and we often blame our eroding democracy on, the wrong president, but it all starts with having local officials who are responsive to the community. I will institute participatory budgeting. We'll solicit ideas to set the agenda. We'll have a vote, both in person and online, so that as many people as possible can participate. That will be to allocate our menu funds. I also believe in a robust set of advisory councils. Those councils have to be diverse. They can't just be the same person year after year after year. These offices have to rotate. We need to get different people involved in the process. And what will that process look like? Proposals will be written and submitted to me. And then I will publicly comment on whether I accept with revision, or reject that proposal. So everyone can see why the alderman made the decision that he or she did. At the end of the day, this is a really important thing that we have to think about because we need to strengthen our democracy. Thank you.
So we need those weekly emails, we need those advisory councils, we need participatory budgeting, we need outreach to organizations, we need community zoning processes, and we need transparency. But let me be clear, none of that is going to work if you don't actually listen to the feedback that you get from the community, if you go your own way and do what you always intended to do in the first place. That's why I'm committed in the participatory budgeting process to follow the will of the neighborhood in how we spend our menu funds. That's why I'm going to make sure that when a developer comes here and wants to build, the answer that I'm going to give them is the answer the community gives me. I will never go above the heads of the neighborhood. And I'll make sure that when we do these processes, we don't just keep going to the same 3 or 4 folks. We involve the entire neighborhood from Devon to Ainsley and from Clark to Sheridan.
Thank you. I'm actually going to make this a two-parter in the next question because they're very similar. I hope you don't mind. First of all, as a resident who's lived here for so long, I am tired of deals being made behind closed doors that I have no impact on until I'm sitting there listening to someone tell me what's going to happen to me in my life. So the first thing I'm going to do is not have an advisory council. I know it sounds shocking. I'm actually going to have, and my family who hates this term, bear with me, I am going to have a residents think tank in the office, open all the time. These residents will be made up of business leaders, community leaders. I looked at a couple of EEC, Association of Sheridan Condominium Owners, and the Historical Society, Block Clubs, Chambers of Commerce, and residents. And they will be there with their own office in the alderman's office. We will make sure that they have the resources, the knowledge, and experts to help guide them, to answer questions they might have, but also be able to play on exactly how these decisions will affect our community and what the community has as a priority. I've got 4 seconds left, so I'll continue that in the next question.
In 2016, I got angry after the federal elections and I got active. I became the director of operations for the Women's March on from Illinois to DC, brought 10,000 people there and back from all over the state. And when I came back, created individual groups at the local levels and also the statewide level for social justice, for voter registration, for voter education, for rural issues, for Truth Brigade, so that we can uplift what's wrong with our media and talk about how we can work together on democracy issues between every election. And as I'm excited to be your next alderwoman, to do the same thing that I have been doing at the state level at a local level, because it's going to matter how we bring to the table when big decisions are getting made, especially as development is coming into our ward.
Thank you. We see the green economy as an economic generator and stimulus here at BC. How would you spend the menu money for green infrastructure, the 48 board, and leverage the city investments in projects to advance Chicago green economy? It's here.
I guess I'm just gonna beat horse some more. Advisory council, right? So I'm gonna have those specific advisory councils set up. I'm going to make sure that the money that I'm given to spend is actually decided by the residents. At the end of the day, this is your money and you should have a say on how it's being spent in your community. I think that will also foster more connection between residents and the things that are going on in our community on their behalf. I would like to see more money spent on parks and green spaces in particular. I think that this is a great way for us to add vegetation to our community, to get away from a lot of the brick and mortar concrete buildings that we seem to become obsessed with. I'd also like to see some of that money used for pedestrianizing some of our streets so that we're making our streets safer for neighbors throughout the ward.
Thank you. Nick?
So our menu money will be spent together via a participatory budgeting process. I look to expand bike lanes to better facilitate cargo bikes because cargo bikes can seek to replace truck traffic on our streets, decarbonizing logistics while better enabling businesses to receive their goods. And at the city level, we can invest more fully in green manufacturing, utilizing funds from the Inflation Reduction Act for expansions in rooftop solar installation, making Chicago making Chicago a center of water tech development and incubating our city as a new hub for clean and climate technology. And we can utilize city funds to establish workforce development programs so that Chicagoans can participate in this new economy.
Yeah, and on my website, there's a bunch of things, but I'll just try to touch on them briefly here. Composting. I would also completely open it up to the community to decide, but here's some of the things that I'm excited about. Composting is a big one, as some people in this room, or a lot of people, if they're EDC, know that methane is a far worse greenhouse gas than CO2. And all of the methane in all of the landfills because of rotting food in the United States is greater than all of USA animal agriculture combined. It's 200 pounds per person of food rotting in landfills. This same food, we can eliminate that whole methane cycle, turn it into soil, get community gardens going. And also another green thing that I'm all about is parkway for pollinators and parkland for pollinators. I grew up rural, as I've said before. Thanks.
Joe Dunn, and I'm going to echo the participatory budgeting. The way we implement menu funds needs to be done as a community. We need to work together. There's things I'd love to see it used for. I'm a big proponent, as you've heard already today, of permeable paving. I'd love to see the permeable alley program expanded. I'd love to see additional safety improvements for crosswalks and for our streets, and that includes bump outs, that includes audible signals at the crosswalk for people who can't see the lights. But I think those are decisions we need to make together. I'm not going to make those decisions independently. At the city level, I think we need to be targeting grants towards green technologies and companies that are pursuing those. So I think that I've talked in other forums about ETOD grants that the city has that target businesses along the train stations. The city should be targeting money also to green technologies and supporting new startup companies that are going to hire locally, bring that economic development we need in that workforce training. And I'm out of time. Thank you.
Yes, to participatory budgeting. And I hope that I see many of you at the table as we are trying to prioritize how to create a green economy in this ward. Development is happening in this ward, and also small business development needs to happen in every single economic corridor. We have one of the busiest pedestrian economic corridors in this ward. Bryn Mawr, Broadway, many different corridors need help. And how can we incentivize our green economy to help entrepreneurs, especially locally, small business, independently owned businesses, to help them get a start that they need in 48th Ward.
Hi, I already mentioned earlier about the comprehensive and inclusive residents think tank, but I will also be polling residents to hear from them individually to see how our menu money should be spent. The other part of having this kind of a group, a think tank, is that a lot of the needs and priorities that our community needs will have been already identified. So that's how we will be spending our menu money. Say that 3 times fast. Okay, but the other thing is that elected officials like myself will have to answer our own phones for at least a couple of hours a week, sitting at the front desk, listening to our residents, talking about what their needs are in terms of the environmental issues we face or any other ones that we face. Our elected officials also need to have continuing education. I will commit to that. I will commit to being the champion of that, because the truth is it would be so misleading for an elected official to tell you, I know everything about tax increment financing. I know everything about property taxes or municipal bonds. And then finally, what I will do is I will bring resources back into the community. In the back there, I have a handout saying that this guy can help you save money and fight climate change. I will bring that to you.
So I'm going to spend menu money to an inventory budget process, but because in this city, too often we've had the appearance of community engagement without the reality of community engagement, let me tell you exactly what that means. It's a 4-step process. First is soliciting ideas from the neighborhood. What is the work that needs doing here in our community? Step 2 is technical review. My office is going to take a look at those ideas, make sure we understand what the cost is and the feasibility of those ideas, so that when we go to the community for votes, those votes are based on information, on informed analysis. Third, we're all going to come together and we're going to vote. And we're going to do it in person and we're going to do it online so that everybody can participate no matter what their situation is. Fourth, we're going to then implement what we vote on, and we're going to make sure that we track what it is so that folks can make sure, and can monitor the progress to make sure that these projects are actually happening. I'll close by saying that this is the gold standard on spending city menu money. It happens in the 49th ward to our north and the 40th ward to our west. It's time for us to have the same options too.
Great, Larry again. Well, I already gave you the whole kind of deal about how we're going to do participatory budgeting. So I want to focus on the green economy in Chicago for this question. I will work at the city level to create a green bank that will use public and private dollars to allow Chicagoans, regardless of income, to make sure that their lifestyle choices and their housing choices are ones that are reducing carbon emissions. I also teach, and I know, the next 5 years, we're going to have a shortage of workers who can work in the green economy. So we need to elect a leader who's going to go to City Hall and work with folks at city colleges, for example, to prepare the next generation of leaders in the green economy and make sure that we have these critical workers so that we can make the infrastructure improvements we want and expand alternative energy options. And finally, at the board level, I've already talked about how to hold developers accountable and how we can invest in things like biking and pedestrian infrastructure. But I want to make sure that it's a priority, regardless of participatory budgeting, that we are doing our utmost to prevent flooding.
Again, like many others, I'd be involved as an alderman with the participatory budgeting process. I would pledge to you that that would at least be at minimum a two-thirds of the menu money, putting aside some of it just for aldermanic discretion in case there's any kind of rainy day funds that are needed that are not planned for. That would be also within the first year of my term. Additionally, I would like to see, we have a ton of properties east of Broadway, myself included, that are along the lakefront. We have massive amounts of, I'm in a mid-rise building myself along Marine Drive. We have rooftop that can be able to capture rainwater through the rainwater bucket program, and having an incentivization there of having those buildings just be able to have those, additionally with green rooftops as well. And then lastly, I absolutely would, this is personal for me, just living along the lakefront and having that be a part of our community.
We're going to start with Nick. This will actually be. Oh, sorry, Andy. I'm so sorry.
All good. So I agree with pretty much what everybody said about the board menu money. I would add that if we really want to put our money where our mouth is, best use of time and effort would be to work with the city treasurer and pass ordinances that provide guides for the city's pension funds. I know that there's already guides in terms of how the pension investments are spent. We can make sure that we are maximizing their impact, making sure that the city's pension funds are being invested in good companies, renewable companies, companies that help the environment. And then the other things, as Alderman, I would say, is to create taxes that incentivize or disincentivize actions. I was talking about, I have coffee shops. We waste a lot of cups. That's a fact. Having a tax on those cups would certainly incentivize more people bringing in their cups from home, which we'd like. And then also investing in public transit, making it easier to ride.
Thank you. To Nick, this will be our final question. What do you personally do to address climate change, and how would you encourage your constituents to do the same?
So I've lived in Chicago for almost 19 years. I'm a cyclist, I primarily ride trains and buses, I recycle, I have LED light bulbs in my home, and in that time, our climate disaster has only gotten worse. So yes, as an alderman, I will work with community organizations, schools, families, businesses, renters, and homeowners to identify opportunities for greater walkability and bikeability, for increased composting initiatives and personal decarbonization practices. But climate change requires a collective systemic response that goes well beyond individual choices. That's why I support reconstituting the Department of the Environment. It's why I'm a proponent of expanded public transportation and a citywide network of protected bike lanes. It's why I believe we need to democratize ComEd. Chicago can and should be a climate resilient city, and I will work collectively in this community and on city council to achieve those goals.
Thank you. Brian?
Thanks. Personally, I use waste not for composting. The thermostat never goes above 65 in my house. I bike everywhere as often as possible. I only drive my car or vehicles when we can combine errands. You know, it's interesting when gas prices go up, all of a sudden gas consumption goes down because all of a sudden everybody figures out, oh, I should really do these 2 or 3 things together rather than just one thing in the car. So then, as far as the biggest risk of climate change, I think it's food insecurity and famine and drought. So that's why I'm going to come right back to composting and why we should be having more urban agriculture and community gardens, because these would also be really great jobs for the south and the west side where there's food deserts. They could probably set up little farmers markets right there on site. They can sell to the local, to restaurants. They're all the restaurants are interested in buying organic food. There's a lot to do. Thanks.
Joe Dunn, personally, one of the things I do is I develop green buildings. I develop green affordable housing buildings across the city of Chicago. I talked a lot about that earlier, the different certification programs I've worked under, LEED and Enterprise Green Communities. And, all the different technologies that go in there, whether it's the green roofs, whether it's the permeable paving. I've done this in a variety of neighborhoods from Woodlawn and West Garfield Park all the way up here to Edgewater. And on a more local level, one of the things I've personally done is I've worked with my kids over the last few years to establish a pollinator garden in our backyard and a lot of milkweed for the monarch butterflies. So it's working with the, with my kids right at home to teach them about preserving endangered species, to teach them about the importance of the interconnectedness of having bees in our neighborhood, having all the pollinators, the things that Brian talks a lot about. They're important to all of us, and they should be important to all of us. So I think it starts at home, and I'm running out of time, so thanks.
So I moved to the ward 24 years ago, and I opened up a small business a block away. So I live a block away from where I work. And I know that a lot of you love living here in the ward because of its walkability, and that contributes to positive ways that we can build resiliency in this ward. A lot of people think that they need to fix climate change, and that's not going to happen, and you're not going to do it by yourself. That's why I look to EDC with all the work that they do and trying to make climate action a part of your lives. And that's how we build resiliency. Another thing that I did was during the pandemic, I made the choice to stop coloring my hair. So whoever of you are in there thinking of doing the same thing, I support you.
Thank you. This is Roxanne. I wanted to say that with regard to climate change, my biggest concern right now is the severe weather and our community's lack of preparedness. Every year, several times a year, we hear tornadoes just happened to the south of us. No such thing has ever happened in history. We see massive flooding across the ward, and we see continuous beach erosion. These are once in a lifetime events that continuously happen multiple times within our lifetime. So what I'm going to do is to listen to the community and our experts so that we can actually proactively invest in the infrastructure of our community so that we can save millions of dollars and lives down the road. One of the other parts of the question actually was, how can I encourage constituents to scale up? I'm going to say, I'm going to listen to all of you. I will use the office as an opportunity for you to share your platforms and how we all can scale up and take all of those measures we can to be better stewards of this environment and of this community. And then finally, I talked about it earlier, 6 seconds. I put in the back a guide that was introduced by the New York Times that talks about the funding that you can get and how to fight for climate change. Please take a look at it, take advantage, because it will help you save money and it will help our community.
I was born right here in Chicago. I have lived in this city for decades and I have never owned a car. So that is how I fight back against global climate change and encourage sustainability. And there's no secret to what we need to do to scale that up. Let's nurse the CTA back to health by ending ghost trains and buses that just never show up. Let's make sure that our CTA is safe. Let's make sure that our CTA is clean. Let's nurture our public transit systems. I've been endorsed by Better Streets Chicago Action Fund because they understand the depth of experience, the concrete plans, and the commitment that I'm bringing to this effort. We need to build an infrastructure that's going to let us be sustainable. We need to do it together.
Larry again. I grew up in a world where we knew climate change was real and we knew that we had to take immediate action. And so I'm someone who avidly recycles, not just the regular everyday stuff, but durable goods, furniture, electronic products. About 3 years ago, after a lot of self-education, I cut meat out of my diet and drastically reduced the amount of animal product that I eat. And I'm also someone who buys alternative energy for my apartment. So, personal choices, it's great, and everyone should do what they can, but we cannot address this problem just through personal responsibility. We need to elect a leader who's going to work with environmental groups like the EEC to pass ordinances that are going to make the city less dependent on carbon emissions. And so I'm committed to that. The last 4 years, we've seen what happens when we have a city government that's unaccountable to us and that fails to take action. We need to send someone to City Hall who's going to be an active leader and who's going to make measurable progress on these issues and bring us the results we deserve. That's why I'm running. Thank you.
Andre Pelican. I personally am an avid CTA user. I live on the lakefront on Marine Drive. In order to get downtown, I can get there in 10 minutes or less on an express bus. However, even just coming up here today, I chose to use a bus to get up here rather than drive my car and circle the block for 20 minutes for parking. Unfortunately, that bus that I was waiting for, I could have walked here quicker. We need a CTA system that has reliable public transportation and green buses. It's too long, too late, not too late, but too long that we still are running our buses on combustible engines. That's very important to me. I also absolutely am for incentivizing our buildings to have the green rooftops I was talking about earlier. These are things that I advocate for as an HOA board member at my particular building itself, a 500+ unit building. As well as lastly, absolutely, I'm a big proponent of making our planet a better place to live, and that's why I'm wearing a peace on our pin today.
So there's lots our board and our city can do to address climate change and make sure the city's more environmentally friendly. I'm not an expert on most of these matters, so that's why I look forward to working with EC and other such groups to learn more about it and turn ideas into action. As a small business owner and with experience working in city government in the mayor's office, I think I'd be good at taking ideas and turning them into actual policy and legislation. Some of those ideas from our state would be having a mandatory that certain departments like Department of Street Sanitation, Transportation, Buildings have a deputy commissioner level position dedicated to environmental issues. Also, many of the CTA does works that people can use in making sure that our treasurers investing our pension funds in green industries and making sure we're getting grants to green industries, especially those on the south and west sides. Thank you.
So I want to start by thanking everyone for showing up on a Saturday. This is great. I mean, seeing everyone here, seeing that the community is engaged has really helped me get through this race, frankly. Sort of similar to Isaac, I do not own a personal vehicle, so I definitely agree with him in the need to bolster public transportation. Me and Andre live in the same building, so I use one of those express buses as well. But then I also think we need to pedestrianize our streets more so that we are getting folks out of their car, maybe not completely, but at least when they're running smaller errands, right? What I will end with though is that climate change, right, is not something that is just like poof, appeared out of nowhere. Like this has been going on for a long time. And so what I would say is that we need leaders with a fresh and new perspective so that we can stop having these conversations every 4 years. We need people who are going to be able to go to city council, do the work, come up with new ideas, and really push legislators to actually act on this so that we can save our planet.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind handing the mic over to Brian, we're going to do real quick 30 seconds. Ending it out. Oh my goodness, Nick, I did it again. Did I just get through? Oh, that's okay. Brian, 30 seconds. What would you like to tell folks as we end this programming tonight?
Like I've said before, I was born on a farm, so I've been a huge advocate for organic, sustainable agriculture, regenerative agriculture for a really long time. My favorite YouTube channel is Kristen Dirksen. Everybody should check it out. She does a lot on sustainability and even adaptive reuse and super environmental awareness. It's really fantastic stuff.
Thank you, Brian. If you would pass it to Joe.
Thank you. Joe Dunn. I would just close by saying I've got the experience and the qualifications to step in and do this job. I've got an MBA from Northwestern. I'm in finance. I know how to read budgets. I know how to operate an office and run a staff. I've done all of that. I've done the green environmental building. I've worked with the zoning department. So much of the job that is part of the Alderman, I've done that work already, and I know the community. I'll have an open office like day one, intend to have it staffed up and make sure everyone's getting their constituent services while we're focused on the broader issues as well. Thank you.
I'm Lenny Hoppenworth. I'm a 24-year resident of the ward, 20 years as a small business owner, public school advocate, and I'm very excited that I will have a chance to be the first Filipino if elected to city council. I'm a queer woman of color, and representation matters.
Breaking this. So I said earlier, my name is Roxanne Volkman. I do have the experience to bring into this position to represent our community, bring things back into this community. I know that there's right now an ongoing project where a lot of community members don't feel like they're a part of the conversation. I want you to know that I will have a clear and transparent office engaging every community member and every community organization at the table with their own office in my office so that we can work together.
My name is Isaac Jones. I'm running for Alder. Use my experience as an assistant attorney general, my experience leading a 100-employee nonprofit, and my deep roots on the far north side to make sure our community is all that it can be. Because this is a sustainability event, we're not handing out brochures today, but I hope you'll click on our QR code to find out more about what we're fighting for. So I'll close by saying that if you believe, as I do, in independent progressive leadership, if you sense, as I do, that our future will be brighter than our past, and if you know, as I do, that we need new ideas to face new challenges, then on February 28th, I'm asking for your vote.
Hi, Larry, everyone. You know, the aldermanic position is really unique to Chicago. Not every city elects an alder person. And so you need to be able to toggle between two specific tasks, constituent services and legislating on city council. We need to elect someone who's able to do both of those jobs, and they need to bring some energy and vigor. The last 4 years, we've seen a lot of Chicago politics stagnate, and we need someone who can break through that. I'm a researcher and educator, so I'm comfortable working on policy issues, and I've built coalitions on public safety and actually passed legislation these last 4 years. I'm going to bring that to this office. Thank you.
Andre Pelican, thank you so much everyone for coming out today. We are the 48th ward. This is our ward and we show up. So I really thank you for all being here, giving us an opportunity to be able to voice our vision and voice how we want to be able to serve you, the people of the 48th ward. In my role, both as a community participant in various boards and organizations, as well as my unique role as a real estate agent, seeing how our commercial corridors need help, how our residents need help. I am all inclusive and want to invite you onto my campaign, and please ask for your vote on February 20th.
Hey, I'm Andy Peters, and why not me?
Can I get his 30 seconds? I don't really know how to top that. It's a good one. I'll give you 3 reasons why I'd like to earn your vote, right? I think one, as I mentioned in the previous question, we need new leaders. We need fresh perspectives on city council. We're gonna get the same results if we keep putting the same type of people in elected office. 2, while I am the youngest candidate, I have government experience, right? Having worked in March this year, I would have worked 6 years in state government at the executive branch level. I know how to navigate bureaucracy in order to actually get things done, not just put ideas on paper. And then the third, which is most important to me, is that I can actually relate to the people who are struggling the most in our society. And that's what we need, people who can relate to people who they're trying to represent.
We're almost there, folks.
Hi, Nick Ward again. I'm running for alderman to distribute compassionate and equitable ward services while working on critical policy issues on the city council, especially those that support our most vulnerable neighbors. And it's because of the relationships that I've built that I'm positioned to do so. Because I'm endorsed by the Chicago Teachers Union and the Illinois Nurses Association. Because I have relationships with community groups like the 48th Ward Neighbors for Justice. Because I've been endorsed by the Sierra Club and 2 sitting older people, Daniel Espada and Carlos Ramirez Rosa, that I will be able to accomplish our goals.
A huge thank you to the Church of Atonement, our volunteers, our Edgewater Environmental Coalition members. Please raise your hand. For restoration and the preservation of historic buildings in the neighborhood. So talk to this person right here.
Last week, if you get them back to us, we'd like to get them compiled and send out to our membership, over 1,500 people, and on our website. Just a few questions about historic preservation and
from the Edgewater Historical Society. Everyone, please put your hands together.
You don't know this.